After 10 weeks of protests broke in Hong Kong, scenes of lines of riot police marching through the streets has become a usual scene. But that does not faze one of the many groups of volunteer medics who are always on the go for medical care. The first aid responders know what to prepare as the tension rises each weekend. Despite the tiredness, they group up and roam the city alongside the protesters to each hit-and-run protest sites.
Of course, I am, because under this climate for wet, and we need to carry a lot of stuff and trying to escape from the police. So that's quite tired and tough day.
So why do you do it?
Because every time when I check, looking at my Facebook, the social media, I saw some of the protesters, they get hit by the police. So I want to come out here and try to minimize the casualties.
Even though the casualties he has seen from the scuffles prompted him to do this volunteer work, but he does not consider himself as part of the rally.
I'm staying neutral. I didn't shout to the police. I didn't say any slogan. I didn't do anything to destroy the city. So I wouldn't consider myself as a protester.
Another weekend had passed, but more protests have already been scheduled for this weekend, braving the risk of being arrested by law enforcement. Hong Kong police said that the hundreds of people have been arrested since the beginning of the large-scale anti-extradition bill protests.
In a word, until yesterday, the police have arrested 748 people, and 115 people have been prosecuted since June 9th.
Authorities also added that 15 police officers had sustained varying degrees of eye injuries due to protesters' use of handheld laser lights. The police spokesperson stressed that officers in the field would ensure using the minimum level of force possible when dealing with the protests.
And based on the actual situations, including the threat encountered by our officers when they are being attacked, they will ensure their use of force minimum as possible and stop once their aim of using that force can be achieved. Sometimes we cannot only rely on a snapshot that it looks like excessive force are being used. But as a whole, we are confident that we exercise our force in a very restrained manner.
Despite this statement, police tactics are toughening after 10 weeks of increasingly violent confrontations between police and protesters plunged Hong Kong into its worst crisis since it reverted from British to Chinese rule in 1997. Meanwhile, across the Hong Kong border, hundreds of members of China's People's Army Police could be seen conducting exercises earlier today in what an editor of a hardliner Chinese state-run publication said is a clear warning to protesters. Troops marched in and out of the Shenzhen Stadium, some in fatigue, some in black t-shirts and camouflage trousers. Dozens of armored paramilitary vehicles would also be seen parked there. On its side, China accused the unidentified foreign forces of fomenting violent protests in Hong Kong, warning them that their conniving efforts had been noticed and that they would end up damaging themselves. The ambassador also said China will use its power to quell Hong Kong protests if the situation deteriorates further.
We've never allowed anyone to undermine one country, two systems, at any excuse. Should the situation in Hong Kong deteriorate further into unrest, uncontrollable for the government of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, the central government would not sit on its hands and watch. We have enough solutions and enough power within the limit of basic law to quell any unrest swiftly.
Yesterday, the U.S. State Department said it was deeply concerned about reports of Chinese police forces massing in Shenzhen and urged the city's government to respect freedom of speech of the protesters.